Terrifying demons invade Earth, decimating humanity in their pursuit of immortality. Ian Stone is killed daily by mysterious entities, only to be reborn each time with no memory of his past lives. One day, during a hockey match, Ian scores the winning goal, but the referee disallows it and prematurely ends the game, leading to his team's loss. His teammates, frustrated, give Ian cold looks as they leave. In the locker room, Ian tries to collect himself, and his girlfriend, Jenny, comes to comfort him. Afterward, Ian offers to drive her home. On the way, he shares his frustration about the game, wondering how the scoreboard could have stopped on its own, adding to the sense that everything was going wrong that day. Jenny, trying to lift his spirits, starts kissing him, but they're interrupted when her parents appear at the window of their house. Jenny says goodbye and hurries inside. As Ian drives away, he notices an eerie swing set in Jenny's yard. Near some railroad tracks, he suddenly stops when he sees a figure lying in the road despite the heavy rain. Concerned, Ian gets out of the car to help. When he touches the person's shoulder, they jolt awake, and Ian rushes back to his car to call for help. However, he can't get through to emergency services. Moments later, he looks up, realizing the figure has disappeared. Suddenly, a monstrous creature smashes through his windshield, grabs him with terrifying limbs, and drags him toward the train tracks. Despite Ian's desperate attempts to break free, the creature holds him until a speeding train runs him over. Immediately after the impact, Ian finds himself in an office, looking older and disoriented. His boss approaches, asking if he's reviewed some spreadsheets, but Ian has no memory of them. He replies that he's about to check them. Jenny, now not his girlfriend but a coworker, hands him more documents, increasing his workload. Ian, confused, asks if she's still planning to visit her relatives for the weekend. She sighs, lamenting her mother's constant pressure to get married and have children. Ian spends the day working, then packs up and heads to the elevator. Just as the doors are about to close, a frightened and agitated man rushes in at the last second. The man panics, rushes out of the elevator, bumps into a stack of empty boxes, and hurriedly leaves the building. As Ian heads toward the exit, he notices the security guard giving him a strange look. Outside, he sees the man from the elevator collapsed on the ground, with concerned bystanders gathered around, thinking he might be having a heart attack. Among them, Ian spots a suspicious figure holding the collapsed man's hand, and something about the stranger's face feels vaguely familiar. Despite his concern, Ian walks past the scene and heads home. Back at his apartment, Ian pours himself a drink and looks out the window, noticing a strange shadow of a person in the building across from him. Suddenly, his wife, Media, quietly sneaks up behind him, startling him. That night, after they make love, Media surprises Ian with a wristwatch, hoping it will help him be on time more often. As she excitedly explains its features, she realizes Ian seems distracted. When she asks what's wrong, Ian tells her about the man from the elevator who died and the odd person in the crowd who reminded him of the hockey referee who used to pick on him. Media is surprised to learn that Ian used to play hockey, but Ian insists he's told her this before. To jog her memory, he pulls out an old photo album and shows her a picture of his college team. However, after looking at the players, Media points out that Ian is in the photo. As they share some ice cream, Ian tries to make sense of it all, convinced that he clearly remembers playing hockey in college. The problem is, I'm remembering something that never happened, he says. Media, unfazed, tells Ian to ignore it and not worry. They return to bed, but Ian struggles to fall asleep. He hears a mysterious voice whisper, "It's already too late," and then sees a creepy shadow outside the window. The next morning, Media wakes Ian up, urging him to hurry so he won't be late for work. On his way to the office, Ian notices his new watch has stopped. During one of the bus stops, he spots two men who look like his old hockey teammates. They glance back at Ian with strange expressions before getting off the bus. Ian chases after them, but they flip him off and disappear into the crowd. Suddenly, a man named Gray approaches Ian, warning, "If you don't listen to me, you'll be killed." Gray insists they must move to a safe place, pointing out a suspicious man lurking in the crowd. Ian follows Gray into a secluded alley, where he finally asks if they've met before. Gray avoids the question, instead pointing out that Ian's watch stopped earlier that morning, a sign that they are coming for him. Though Gray doesn't clarify who they are, he reveals that these beings have been hunting Ian since yesterday, when he awoke in the office, and that this current life was specifically created for him. Skeptical, Ian tries to walk away, but Gray warns him that this life, like the previous one where Ian played hockey in college, will soon end. Hearing about hockey, Ian hesitates, realizing there might be truth to Gray's words. Gray explains that Ian was someone else before, and unless he breaks free, he'll be trapped in an endless cycle, living new lives and dying every day. These beings, Gray says, can manipulate reality and control minds, making Ian perceive only what they want him to see. Growing frustrated, Ian demands to know who they are. Gray replies that people often call them demons or ghosts, though Ian remains doubtful, rejecting the idea of witchcraft. Gray insists these creatures exist in another dimension and will soon come to make Ian obey their will. Angry and desperate for answers, Ian grabs Gray and slams him against the wall, demanding to know what these entities want. Suddenly, a black monster materializes from the wall and drags Gray away. Horrified, Ian bolts from the alley and runs into the street, where he briefly sees a figure with empty, black eyes. Blinking, Ian realizes it was just his imagination. He tries to call someone, but his phone has no signal. Frantic, he rushes to a nearby phone booth, but all he hears through the receiver is eerie static. Terrified, Ian races home and bursts into his apartment, telling media that something is hunting him. Just then, eerie noises echo from the basement, and in his panic, Ian locks the door. Media tries to comfort and embrace him, but suddenly red splatters appear on the door. In a horrifying twist, Media stabs Ian with a huge black claw, revealing she is one of them. She kisses him, then pushes him to the floor and strikes again, whispering that he shouldn't have remembered his past life. With a final slash, she cuts his throat. Ian awakens in a new life, this time behind the wheel of a car, narrowly avoiding a collision with a truck. Ian is now a taxi driver, and his next passenger is Jenny. She asks him to stay alert and not fall asleep at the wheel, and Ian apologizes for his moment of carelessness. To keep himself awake, he starts chatting with Jenny, who mentions she's visiting her parents for the weekend and dreads the usual talks about marriage and children. Soon, Ian drops her off at her house, and Jenny invites him in for coffee. Not wanting to intrude, Ian declines, so she offers to bring the coffee out to him instead. While waiting in the car, Ian notices a mysterious man on the street and glimpses a strange shadow in the window of a neighboring house. Suddenly, Jenny appears behind him, startling Ian. He quickly gets back into the car and notices that his watch has stopped again. After grabbing the coffee Jenny brought, Ian drives off, but soon spots Gray waving at him from the roadside. Ian slams on the brakes and, feeling uneasy, grabs a wrench before approaching Gray. Although he senses he knows Gray, he can't remember from where. Gray grabs Ian by the shoulders and insists that he must remember everything, or they will come for him again. He also warns that Jenny is in danger and needs protection. Flashbacks from Ian's previous lives flood his mind, showing that he has always been connected to Jenny in some way. Suddenly, Ian hears a noise behind him. He turns, raising the wrench, only to find that Gray has vanished. He spots a black creature lurking on the rooftop of a nearby building. After being attacked by the monster, Ian wakes up yet again, this time in an employment agency. Now, with fragments of his past lives still lingering in his memory, Ian searches for information in the papers scattered on the desk. At that moment, Jenny walks into the office, offering to help him with his job search. As they discuss Ian's past interviews, Jenny notices he seems deeply troubled. When she asks if something is wrong, Ian decides to reveal the truth. He confesses that he wakes up in different places every day, and the only constant is her. Jenny doesn't believe him and accuses him of relapsing into drug use, despite his promises to stay clean. Desperate, Ian tries to convince her that he's telling the truth and that they are both in serious danger. Ian soon notices that time has stopped again, and a figure from his past lives, now with a massive black claw, is waiting outside the door. Terrified, Ian bolts from the office and rushes into the elevator, but the creature punches through the ceiling with its claw. Ian narrowly escapes, running down the hallway where he bumps into a confused Jenny, who doesn't understand what's happening. He repeats that she's in danger, just as more figures from his past lives start to appear. Panicking, Ian runs toward the stairs, chased by these dark shadows, and eventually bursts into a parking lot. Two of the shadows continue to pursue him as he runs into the street, hails a taxi, and momentarily escapes. But soon after, a black claw pierces through the taxi roof. In a panic, Ian jumps out of the vehicle, only to be struck by another car. Lying injured on the road, unable to move, he watches as media and the other men from his past lives approach.
This time, Ian wakes up to loud music in a filthy apartment, realizing he's now living as a junkie. Hearing a knock on the door, he struggles to get up from the mattress and opens it to find Jenny, now his neighbor, angrily demanding that he turn down the music. Ian tries to talk to her, but she notices a syringe sticking out of his arm and recoils in disgust before retreating to her apartment. Later, as Jenny prepares to leave, Ian bursts into her apartment, begging for help. Frightened, Jenny grabs a kitchen knife, ready to defend herself. Ian reminds her that they've known each other in past lives. Suddenly, Ian feels ill as time stops again. Jenny attempts to call for help, but Ian forbids her from leaving, insisting she remember events from their past lives. He shares facts that he couldn't possibly know, and Jenny starts to recall fragments of their shared past. Before they can make sense of it, a monster's claw smashes through her front door, and dark shadows flood the apartment. Ian and Jenny manage to escape through the window, racing down the stairs and into the backyard, only to find themselves surrounded by the monsters. Ian grabs a piece of broken glass to defend them, but suddenly, Media appears and grabs his hand, forcing him against the wall, preparing to finish him off again. In a tense moment, Jenny sneaks up behind Media and stabs her in the shoulder with the kitchen knife. Distracted, Media releases Ian, and the two flee once more. They soon descend into the subway, where Jenny finds a piece of fabric to bandage Ian's arm. She admits that after Ian asked her to remember, she began recalling all their past lives. When the train arrives, they board, hoping to delay another encounter with the monsters. Ian suggests Jenny should stay away from him, but she insists on staying together, no matter what. At the next stop, a guard enters the car, stares at them intently for a few seconds, then exits to join Media and the others. As the journey continues, Jenny falls asleep on Ian's shoulder. Gray suddenly appears beside Ian, and Ian realizes that Gray is one of the creatures. Gray reveals that they are called harvesters, beings that live forever by feeding on human fear. When an old man enters the car at the next station, Gray shifts into his monstrous form and terrifies the man into fleeing. Instantly rejuvenated, Gray explains that ordinary fear is no longer enough for many harvesters, who now crave stronger emotions. The intense fear experienced just before a violent death is the most powerful. The harvesters, once parasites, have evolved into predators, taking more lives in their quest for this fear. Ian asks why the harvesters won't leave him alone, and Gray explains that Ian was once the most powerful harvester who rebelled against the others. They can't destroy him, but they can keep forcing him into new lives until he submits. Gray warns Ian to protect Jenny, as she's his only chance at a normal life. He also informs Ian that the harvesters have already found them, then vanishes. Ian wakes Jenny, and they rush out of the subway car, but monsters disguised as hockey players are already pursuing them. As they race through the station, they accidentally knock over a passerby, who is quickly caught and killed by the harvesters, his throat slit as his fear consumes him. Soon, Media and the other harvesters catch up with Ian and Jenny. Media mocks Ian, saying he's weak because he hasn't fed on fear for a long time. She extends her black claws and pins Jenny against the wall, while Ian's veins begin to darken, a sign that his hunger for fear is growing uncontrollable. Media tries to convince Ian to return to the harvesters, claiming they can be together again if he destroys Jenny. Suddenly, Ian's expression changes and he begins choking Jenny, absorbing her fear as she struggles against him. She pleads with Ian to stop, and at the last moment, he lets her go, throwing himself under the train. Sorry for what he's done, Ian finds himself in yet another life. He wakes up strapped to a bed in a psychiatric hospital and calls out for help. A nurse comes to check on him, but to her, Ian is simply in a coma. After confirming his condition is stable, she leaves, and Media appears before the restrained Ian. She tells him that the harvesters have to kill him each time to make him forget why he turned against them, but his memories keep returning. Media demands that Ian confess how he managed to kill one of the harvesters, as none of them possess that power. Ian, confused, has no idea what happened. Frustrated, Media and the other harvesters take drastic measures and transfer him to an operating room, where they begin torturing him. Media explains that although they cannot destroy him, they won't release him because he's become a threat to their existence. She warns that the torture will continue until he tells them the truth. After another toxic injection, Ian loses consciousness. He wakes up again in a hospital ward and sees a child lying in the bed across from him. Media reappears, telling Ian that he needs to feed or he'll weaken. Refusing to harm the child, Ian watches as the harvesters take on terrifying forms and frighten the boy instead. The child screams in terror, prompting doctors and nurses to rush in, though they have no idea what caused it. Ian briefly loses consciousness again, and when he wakes, he sees Jenny, now a nurse, standing in front of him. Her presence triggers a flood of memories for Ian, reminders of the torture Media inflicted to learn the truth. Media, meanwhile, realizes that Ian betrayed the harvesters because of Jenny, who he unconsciously brings into each of his lives. Convinced that eliminating Jenny will make Ian return to the harvesters, Media plots to take her out. Sometime later, an aged and weakened Gray appears in Ian's ward. Gray explains that Ian became human because of his love for Jenny, a love that made him strong enough to destroy other harvesters, stop feeding on fear, and even create life. Gray shares that he too had once found love and gained a new life, but the harvesters destroyed his beloved. Gray warns Ian that he must do everything in his power to protect Jenny from the harvesters. However, to stand a chance, Ian needs to feed. Though Ian insists he can't harm others, Gray offers to let Ian feed on his own fear, helping him pass away. Reluctantly, Ian agrees. Gray takes Ian's hand, transferring his remaining strength to him. Ian's wounds heal instantly, and Gray dissipates into thin air. Shortly after, the harvesters return to the ward, only to find that Ian has vanished. They search the room thoroughly, which has been turned upside down. Suddenly, Ian, now in his monstrous form, ambushes one of the harvesters, swiftly taking down a second one as well. Shifting back into his human form, Ian leaves the ward and heads toward Jenny. Meanwhile, Jenny is working in the archives, unaware of the eerie black shadows of the harvesters closing in on her. Each time one of them moves to strike, Ian intercepts, piercing them with his massive claw. After eliminating the harvesters in the archives, Ian follows Jenny to the morgue, where she finally notices the approaching monsters and calls for help. Ian urges her to run as he battles the harvesters. Jenny flees into the corridor, but Media ambushes her. Hearing her scream, Ian rushes to help, but Media transforms him back into his human form and starts shifting him through his past lives. She then declares that Jenny won't be with him in his next life. Grabbing Jenny and using her as a shield, Media forces Ian to make a desperate decision. Realizing there's only one way to destroy Media, Ian drives his claw through both Jenny and Media, remembering Gray's words about the power of love to create life. Media disintegrates instantly, and Ian catches the wounded Jenny, promising her that this was all just a bad dream. He heals her with the power of his love. In the end, Ian finds himself back on the ice rink, scoring the winning goal without interference from any referees. Jenny meets him in the locker room to congratulate him on his victory, and Ian thanks her for making him human, though she has no memory of what happened. Just then, Ian spots a strange figure and instinctively gives chase. Confronting the harvester in one of the corridors, Ian fiercely defends his human life with his black claw. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.